Yesterday, as luck would have had it, my best friend from secondary school just so happened to be in Yellowstone on the same day that we arrived. We spent the morning cooling off at the Firehole swimming area, lunchtime being amazed by the geyser activity at the Norris Basin, and the afternoon discovering the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone. Last night we said our goodbyes as today they're heading off to Salt Lake City, but our plan is to explore the northern area of Yellowstone. The national park is home to the largest concentration of mammals in the lower 48 states, so we hope to spot some of the critters that call Yellowstone home, whilst also finding out more about how the area came to be the world's first national park. Good morning and welcome to our second day here in Yellowstone National Park. It is still super early this morning, but that is because we are out on a wildlife safari. The park rangers yesterday were saying that the best chance in the morning to be able to see some wildlife is between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. And we were quite good, and we were just driving out of our Roosevelt Lodge campground at about 2 minutes past 6, and at the moment we are heading out on the road towards the Lamar Valley, where we are more likely to be able to see some animals there than in other parts of the park. So let's see what we can go and find. Just a couple of minutes into our drive and we've already managed to come across all of these bison, which is just amazing. And they're gonna cross. Oh, careful of this one. Okay, that's fine. Just have a fight in the middle of the road. Don't mind us, the fact that we're trying to drive here. Oh my goodness. This is nuts. It's like they just don't realise that this is a road, and as soon as one shifts, another one just comes onto the road. So all of these people behind me are gathered because there's been a spotting of a few grizzly bears on the hills behind us. Unfortunately, they are quite far away as far as like photo opportunities go, and certainly this GoPro is not going to pick them up. But people have been so friendly. We didn't really know what all of the cars were pulled over for, and this guy came over and he was like, would you like a reference point as to where you should be looking? And then he said, oh hey, I've got a telescope if you'd like to have a look through my telescope. So I managed to get a really good view of the grizzly bears, and it's just one of the things about being out here in America. We found that everyone who we are meeting in these national parks is so friendly and so welcoming. It's just really wonderful, and we get to have such a better experience because of it. We have just arrived at the Trout Lake Trailhead. Really short hike. I think it's only about 0.9 of a mile up, and then obviously the same to come back down, but it is supposed to be really beautiful when you get up there. It's still before 8 o'clock, so we're kind of hoping that we don't come across any crazy wildlife, certainly things like grizzly bears. That would be super scary, but we shall see how we go. And apparently the first part's like really strenuous, very uphill, and then it flattens out, so we'll see how out of breath I get. We've just come back to our accommodation after having done our little safari drive. I thought it might be nice just to show you guys around. We've chosen to spend 2 nights up in the northeast of the park at the Roosevelt Lodge and Cabins, and we have booked ourselves into what's known as a Roughrider cabin. I thought it would be quite nice just to show you guys what one of those is. So you can kind of see it behind me. We have a bed, we have got the recycling and the compost and the landfill. We do also have a stove, which is behind me here, and they've provided us with some logs with which to burn. We're here very early August, and to be honest, last night we didn't need the extra heat. There was even a thunderstorm last night, so I can confirm that it's very watertight. No water was coming into the cabin last night. So even, yeah, on a chilly night when it's been raining and the thunderstorms brought the temperature right down, in the summer you're fine, you don't need that. But I was reading some reviews on TripAdvisors from people who were here like September time, October time, and they were saying, yeah, they definitely needed to use that stove to stay warm at night. You have also got like some drawers and a little chair, and then yeah, like a little bedside table. They've also provided us with some extra blankets and pillows just in case it does get a little bit on the chilly side. There's a couple of windows on both sides, both of them open, and you've got bug screens on them to be able to keep out the bugs. The one thing that I probably would say was something that I was aware of before we turned up is that we haven't been provided with any kind of coffee making facilities, and I'm not very human first thing on a morning without having a cup of coffee. And because we knew that we would be getting up super early in the morning, we were aware that nowhere was going to be open for hot coffee. So what we decided to do was pick up a few of these cans of coffee so that we can drink them first thing on a morning before anywhere opens up, and it's not really problematic that there isn't anywhere to actually make a cup of coffee. So I would say that if you are choosing to stay in somewhere like this would be my tip. Just pick up some coffee from a store, bring it with you, and then you can drink it here. Oh, and one last thing that I forgot to mention was with regards to the towels. Because we're kind of camping here and the shower block's separate to the actual cabin, we weren't really too sure whether we were going to have towels included or if we needed to bring our own. So we ended up bringing our own just in case. But yeah, these are provided. There's like bath towels, hand towels, there's even face cloths. So you've pretty much got everything covered. They've left a fun fact as well with the towels that apparently within the park there's only about 4,900 bison, and yet there's about 24,000 towels in the national park across all of their lodges. So yeah, if you're going to come and stay here in the Roughrider Cabins, don't worry about needing to bring towels, they provide them. So this is the outdoor setting here at the Roosevelt Lodge and Cabins. Behind me you have got the shower block. Inside of there you've got about 4 toilets and a couple of showers. So far I've not had to see anyone queuing for anything. They've also got some taps here where we can fill up our water ready for when we go hiking, and it's just lots of individual little cabins. in like a rural kind of setting. It's super rural out here. I would say in comparison to Yosemite National Park, where we have stayed at Curry Village, it's not quite so pretty and picturesque. You are allowed to take your cars all the way up to the cabins, so that kind of spoils the feel of it a little bit, whereas at Curry Village with the tents, no cars were allowed to go there, and you were kind of like in amongst the trees and you could really smell the pines. But it's still really, really nice here, and I would actually say that the accommodations inside are a little bit better than the Curry Village tent camps, so you get something here but you lose something as well. So this here is the main area. Behind me you have got a little store. It sells everything from coffee and snacks through to gifts and souvenirs, and then we've also got the Roosevelt Lodge as well, which is this behind me, and inside of there's like a little bar. There's the check-in where we had to check in to get into the cabins, and then there's also a restaurant. And the really nice thing about out on the porch is that you've got some rocking chairs, so you can just sit out there playing cards, having a drink in the evenings, and it's just really, really nice atmosphere out here. Behind me is Tower Fall, and it gets its name from the towering rocks that are up at the top before it reaches the actual cascade of the waterfall. And whilst it's not exactly the most impressive waterfall that we've seen on our travels, those towering rocks up at the top do make it quite special and a bit different from what we have seen so far. So we have stopped off now at the Petrified Tree, which you might be able to see behind me. It's all ring fenced off, quite unusually actually for one of the national parks here in the States. Now when we first planned out this trip, it all came about because we'd seen these super cheap flights on Jack's Flight Club. We flew into Denver and Colorado, and we knew that our exiting flight was from Phoenix and Arizona. But past that, we kind of had like a 3-week gap, and we were trying to work out exactly what we wanted to do, where we wanted to go without it being too ridiculous. And going to the Petrified Forest was one of the things that we ummed and ahed about, but we decided that it was going to be too long of a drive, so it's kind of cool that we've been able to see one here in Yellowstone. So perhaps should have read the information before we went up to go and see the tree, but about 50 million years ago a volcano here in Yellowstone erupted, and all of the ash and the sand and the water that came down the mountainside completely gazumped and filled the forests, and there was redwood trees around here. Before the trees had a chance to actually rot, in all of that sort of volcanic flow and ash there was lots and lots of silica, and it was that silica that was able to plug the living cells and created these petrified trees. Turns out that there were actually 3 trees. There's a photograph showing another one back in 1907, but unfortunately some thoughtless people have come along and taken down the trees kind of like as souvenirs, and that's one of the reasons why they've ended up fencing off the tree. I mean, I would have hoped and thought that by current day people wouldn't come to national parks and do that were perhaps better educated, but I'm sure there's probably very good reason as to why the national park have felt that there's the need to have that fence around it still. We have driven along to the town or village, I'm not entirely sure how you best classify it, but that of Mammoth Hot Springs. First thing that we're going to do up here are the Mammoth terraces, which from what I can remember are kind of like travertines of sort of rock that has been completely transformed by all of the sulfur and the volcanic activity. Behind me here is supposed to be Jupiter Spring. They've still got a sign up stating that it is Jupiter Spring, but one of the things that you might be able to notice is that life has started to grow behind us now. Some of the trees that you can see that are pretty dead, they ended up dying because the roots sucked up some of the calcium carbonate that blocked its way of being able to sap up the water, and it just died through lack of water, died through dehydration. But the last time that this spring was active was back in 1998, so just over 20 years ago. And because there hasn't been any activity, it means that now soil has started to get deposited here, and we can start to see some traces of some trees and also some wildflowers growing as well. And if it stays dormant the way in which it has done for the last 20 or so years, that means that this area is going to become more and more alive. So this behind me is Devil's Thumb, and I've been doing some reading up on this area and the geographical nature behind why all of this looks the way in which it does. It turns out that geographically around here the earth is actually made up of lots of fractures and fissures, and so when the snow melts or when the rain comes down to earth, the water ends up going down through these fractures and fissures, and it gets so deep into the earth's crust to a point where it gets heated up, and then the springs end up pushing it through, and that's why we end up with the springs behind us with the water coming out of it. And there's a whole load of other chemistry that then goes on to create the colours that we see. Behind me here is Liberty Cap, and in the past this was actually an active spring, and the pressure was so great that it was pushing the water up really quite high, and there were mineral deposits that over probably hundreds and hundreds of years have built up to then leave the stack behind us that we can see today. Unfortunately it is inactive, but it would have been really awesome had this still been active today, seeing spring water coming out of the top of this. But either which way, it's really cool that Mother Nature can create these kinds of things. Yellowstone National Park was the very first national park here in the United States. In the late 1800s, a lot of people started coming to this area and actually exploiting it. So they were doing things like hunting, for example the Petrified Tree that we saw earlier on today. You know, people were coming along and taking things like this. They were also going up to the Mammoth Springs area and taking some of the rocks and destroying that geology. And so in the late 1800s, some people were sent out to this area to start protecting it, but unfortunately the people who came, some people were a bit experienced and other people were just ill-experienced and really didn't have a clue what they were doing. Congress wasn't willing to put any money towards it until eventually in 1886 they said, okay, we will give some funds to this. A US Army was then positioned out here, and for the first few years it was really rough, particularly during the winters, because all that they had were tents at the bottom of the Mammoth Springs. And after about 5 years they started to realise, okay, this is going to be a little bit more permanent than what we first thought, and so Congress again ended up allocating funds that has enabled for this area that you can see behind me to have been built. And this is where a lot of the army officers and their families all live in order to be able to protect the Yellowstone area from those people who were coming in and really not wanting to protect and preserve the area. These days the buildings from the outside have been preserved in such a way to make it still look how it would have done back in the late 1800s. But the insides have been completely updated, and the people who work for the National Park Service now live in these houses. And it means that the people who are working here for the National Park, their commute is significantly reduced because they are actually living within it. There's supposed to be a lot of elk around here, but we've not seen any, but that's fine. We saw quite a lot of wildlife earlier. Although I'm being told, actually, if we keep on walking, we might be able to see some elk, so let's keep on going. So it turns out that actually the elk, instead of being in amongst all of the workers' houses, they're actually out on the main road, which is a little bit unfortunate because much like anything in Yellowstone National Park when it comes to wildlife and being near a road, it just kind of turns into a little bit of a farce. We're only supposed to be a maximum of 25 meters close to these animals, so I'm trying to keep my distance, but of course all of these cars keep on going by, which is really difficult because they keep on stopping in the way of being able to see them. We've been told by the rangers that all of these are pretty much females. The males will have gone off just to rest and eat so that they can grow their antlers ready for the rutting season, which will be in September, October time. So none of them unfortunately have the crazy big antlers, which sometimes we can see with elk. She said that maybe one or two of them are male, but they're super young, so really they're kind of too young to be able to tell. But yeah, it's just crazy. We just saw a bear and it's just gone over the top of this hill. People who were way back in traffic, just really inconsiderate, honking their horns. Something has definitely spooked it.
It's up there.